Hey guys, tonight we dive deep. Not into battles or kings, but into the shadowy world of medieval superstitions that quietly ruined lives. These beliefs shaped daily choices, whispered accusations, and turned neighbors into suspects without a word spoken. Before you get comfy, take a moment to like and subscribe if you genuinely enjoy these slow, thoughtful explorations. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us across the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft hum, and let's gently slip into tonight's story together, believing that a crooked birthmark was a devil's mark. Imagine yourself in a quiet, early dawn centuries ago, when the world was shaped by customs as old as the village itself. The light seeps in gently through oiled parchment windows, falling across rough wooden walls, the earthen floor swept clean the night before. In these hours, the world is soft and close, bounded by the warmth of the hearth and the hush of sleeping family. Yet beneath the calm, a network of unspoken fears and beliefs weaves its way through every home, every lane, and every conversation spoken in low voices at dusk. In this time, every birth is a moment of profound hope and quiet anxiety. Mothers and midwives watch closely as a new child enters the world, searching tiny limbs and faces for signs and portents. Most infants, slippery and red from the struggle of birth, bear some mark, a small mole, a patch of dark skin, a line or shadow beneath the ribs. Most are quickly forgotten, explained away as the bruising of a difficult delivery or a quirk of inheritance. But some marks are different, crooked, oddly shaped, a swirl where the skin twists or darkens in an unfamiliar way. In these quiet corners of the past, such a mark can take on an outsized significance. At first, it may be only the midwife who notices, her eyes sharp and cautious from long years of tending birth and loss. She says nothing as she swaddles the child, but her silence is noted by the mother, and perhaps later, by the grandmother who comes to bless the baby. In the following days, neighbors might visit, peering into the cradle and exchanging soft words. If the mark is noticed, a bent line across a shoulder, a patch shaped like a crescent moon, or something resembling a claw, it is not quickly forgotten. Superstition, in this age, is both shield and shackle. The world is full of unseen forces, of blessings and curses, of fortunes turned by a single sign. The crooked birthmark, when spoken of in whispers, is called by many names. A witch's teat, a devil's print, the shadow of misfortune. Such marks are rare enough to draw quiet attention, but common enough that almost every community holds some story of a child touched in this way. At first, the family might hope the mark will fade. Grandmothers rub herbs into the skin, mothers pray quietly over the cradle, and fathers avoid mention of it altogether, hoping hard work and silence will protect their child from notice. Yet, in the tight weave of village life, secrets are hard to keep. A neighbor notices, a child blurts out what adults dare not say, or an old story is revived when the child falls ill or a misfortune visits the house. Slowly, suspicion grows, fed not by evidence but by the slow drip of rumor and the human need to explain suffering. Children born with such marks are quietly watched as they grow. Each stumble, each odd habit, each unlucky event becomes a quiet tally in the minds of neighbors and sometimes, sadly, even family. If the child is withdrawn, it is the mark at work. If they are clever or quick-tongued, someone mutters that the devil loves cunning. If an animal sickens or a storm damages a roof, some recall the night the child was born, or the shape of the birthmark glimpsed in infancy. Families bear the weight of this suspicion in small, daily ways. Invitations to gatherings become less frequent. The child is gently discouraged from joining games or walking alone to the well. In church, glances linger just a bit too long. At market, whispers ripple in the air, quickly swallowed by talk of weather and crops. Some neighbors are kind, brushing aside the old stories. offering a smile or a hand in harvest. But others grow distant, clinging to caution in a world where every misfortune feels like a puzzle to be solved, a threat to be avoided. The fear, for many, is less of the child than of what the mark might bring. A blight on crops, illness, storms, or an unexplained loss. In a time without medicine or certainty, people seek patterns, finding comfort in stories that make sense of the unpredictable. Birthmarks become a sign to explain the unexplainable. And so, suspicion hardens slowly into certainty. What began as a hush in the cradle becomes, over seasons, an unspoken truth that shapes the lives of all it touches. Yet even as these beliefs press in, daily life continues. The child grows, learning which houses offer welcome and which do not, which neighbors speak kindly and which look away. Their family adapts, carrying pride and pain together, finding solace in quiet moments and the loyalty of a few steadfast friends. The mark itself may fade with time, or become simply another feature, as ordinary as freckles or scars. Stories of such marks are handed down, sometimes as warnings, sometimes as gentle lessons in tolerance or regret. In some seasons, another child is born with a similar mark, and the village must decide, again, whether to fear or to accept, to shun or to embrace. The memory of suspicion lingers, but so too does the quiet resilience of those who lived beneath its shadow. In later years, when old beliefs give way to new knowledge, the crooked birthmark becomes less a symbol of fear and more a reminder of how closely human lives are shaped by the stories they tell, and by the power of quiet, unchallenged certainty. For every tale of shunning, there is another of quiet kindness. A loaf left on a doorstep, a hand reached out in friendship, the slow, steady work of building trust where suspicion once flourished. As you let this story drift into quiet, imagine the gentle hush of a village morning, the soft creak of floorboards, and the patient endurance of those who lived under watchful eyes. In every age, it is these small acts of care and courage, carried out in the face of suspicion, that gradually change the shape of the world. One life, one mark, one whispered story at a time. Assuming a black cat crossing your path meant ruin. Imagine yourself walking along a quiet country road, the kind that winds between fields and hedgerows, the ground packed hard by centuries of footsteps and wooden cartwheels. The air is cool, fresh with the smell of morning dew on grass, and the only sounds are birds singing and the distant lowing of cattle. This is a road familiar to every villager, merchant, and farmer, a path trodden daily in the slow rhythm of rural life. Yet, for all its comfort and routine, the road also carries its share of caution. Along its length, the old stories travel as surely as people do. Stories of luck, warning, and omen. Chief among them, perhaps, is the quiet dread that comes when a black cat darts across your path. For centuries, this small, silent moment has carried enormous weight, shaping the decisions of those who witnessed it in subtle but meaningful ways. In the gentle hush of dawn, a merchant might set out early, his wagon loaded with goods for market. Every step of his journey is measured. He knows the value of time and the risks of delay. But should a black cat emerge from the roadside thicket, gliding silently across his way, he feels a cold knot of worry tighten in his chest. The rhythm of his day falters. Some merchants would turn back at once, preferring to lose a morning than risk ruin. Others would wait by the side of the road, staring at the spot where the cat vanished, reciting quiet prayers or searching for a different route. The rhythm of their lives, so often dictated by weather and season, is now quietly swayed by a fleeting shadow in the road. Farmers, too, carry the burden of this omen, the choice of when to plant, when to harvest, when to drive animals to distant pasture. All these decisions are heavy with consequence. The memory of past failures, poor harvests, or sudden loss lingers in every cautious step. So if, on the way to the fields, a black cat crosses the path ahead, a farmer might pause, feeling the weight of superstition pressing in. Sometimes, the work would be postponed entirely. Chores left for another day. Tools set aside in uneasy silence. The fields themselves, shaped by labor and luck, now wait for a sign that the day's danger has passed. These beliefs are rarely spoken aloud, at least not in earnest. Instead, they pass in whispers, in half-joking warnings and knowing glances. Children learn early to notice the color and direction of every animal's crossing. Neighbors share stories of harvests ruined after an unlucky sighting, or of journeys cut short, only to discover misfortune averted. Even those who claim not to believe will often find themselves hesitating, just for a moment, when a sleek black form melts into the roadside grass. The cat itself moves with the world's own rhythm, heedless of the meaning attached to its path. Sometimes a beloved pet, sometimes a stray, it slips through the landscape unseen, a silent participant in the rituals of caution and hope. In some places, the presence of a black cat brings comfort, a sign of luck or protection. But in these villages, for these people, it is a quiet warning, an echo of older fears. There are rituals to blunt the omen, gentle gestures carried out almost unconsciously. A merchant might trace a symbol in the dirt, or a farmer might spit over his shoulder, hoping to turn bad luck aside. Some carry charms in their pockets, a coin, a scrap of ribbon, a small stone rubbed smooth by anxious fingers. These small acts become part of the journey, as much a part of daily life as the path beneath their feet. The rhythm of the seasons continues, each year marked by stories of ruined ventures, lost crops, sudden illness, sometimes linked in memory to a single dark shape crossing the road. The truth of these connections is less important than the comfort found in believing there is a pattern, a reason, even if that reason is only a cat and an old story shared in silence. You can imagine the soft crunch of boots on gravel, the gentle brush of leaves in the breeze, the pause in conversation as a black cat glides through the edge of vision. The world slows for a moment, shaped by caution and the gentle repetition of belief. Time resumes its pace, but the day is subtly changed. Plans are altered, routes diverted, tasks delayed or undertaken with a new sense of care. Historians may note these beliefs only in passing, a footnote to the greater movements of trade and agriculture. Yet, in the quiet moments of daily life, superstition weaves itself into every step. It brings communities together in shared caution, in stories and rituals, in the gentle comfort of believing that danger can be foreseen, or at least gently avoided. As evening falls and the road grows quiet again, the shadows lengthen, and the fields settle beneath a calm sky. The black cat is gone, the day's choices already shaped by its passing. The rhythm of life continues, marked by caution, hope, and the small, silent gestures that carry meaning across the centuries. So as you drift into rest, picture the quiet road, the gentle arc of a black cat's movement, and the hush that follows, a moment of superstition quietly respected, guiding the day in its own soft way. Trusting that a child's first cry predicted their fate. Imagine yourself in a quiet cottage at the very edge of a small village, where the first light of dawn is only beginning to chase away the shadows. The hearth glows faintly, casting gentle warmth over low walls and earthen floor. In one small chamber, the air is thick with anticipation, the hush broken only by the low murmurs of women gathered close and the soft, regular breaths of a laboring mother. Midwives move quietly, their hands practiced and steady, their voices a blend of encouragement and comfort. It is a scene that has unfolded in countless variations for generations, a moment where every sound and silence carries meaning. In these hours, before the world fully awakens, the focus narrows to the most ancient of rituals, the birth of a child. For all the skill and wisdom that midwives bring, there is one moment they await above all others, a sound that will shape their first judgments and, in subtle ways, the unfolding of a new life. This is the child's first cry, The belief is both simple and deeply rooted. The first cry is not merely a sign of health or vigor, but a portent, a glimpse into the fate awaiting this newborn. Midwives listen intently, faces drawn with the weight of expectation. If the cry comes strong and clear, it is greeted with a wash of relief. Smiles flicker, prayers are whispered, and the news spreads softly through the house. The child's fortune is good. But if the cry is weak, thin, or rasping, a hush settles, heavy as a shroud. The mother's eyes are watched more carefully. The room grows quieter, and the first gentle touches become more tentative. In the language of the time, a feeble cry foretold sorrow, a life marked by hardship, frailty, or even early loss. This conviction shapes the rhythm of early care. A robustly crying baby is swaddled with confidence, held close and fussed over by relatives, their prospects discussed in hopeful tones. There is laughter, perhaps, or the quick making of plans for a christening. Visitors bring small tokens, a ribbon, a piece of sweet bread, or a sprig of herbs to hang above the cradle. The future, in these moments, feels open and promising, the child already woven gently into the fabric of family and village. Yet when the first cry falters, everything changes. The baby is swaddled more cautiously, sometimes set aside while the mother is tended, sometimes watched with a vigilance that borders on suspicion. Conversations grow more muted. Superstitions, never far from daily life, rise to the surface. Perhaps the child has been marked by fate. Perhaps an ill wind blew through the open window, or some forgotten slight has brought misfortune to the threshold. The midwife might press a protective charm into the blanket, or trace a quiet blessing across the infant's brow. Prayers for strength are murmured, but the undercurrent is unmistakable: anxiety and the expectation of sorrow. This belief is neither cruel nor cold, but a reflection of a world where survival itself is uncertain, and every birth is a moment balanced between hope and fear. Infant mortality is common. Sickness can sweep through a household in days. The first cry becomes a kind of shorthand, a way for families and midwives alike to name their fears, to prepare themselves for what might lie ahead. In this way, the child's fate is shaped not only by the strength of their voice, but by the weight of belief that greets it. You can imagine the repetition of this ritual, season after season. The midwives, often women who have attended dozens, even hundreds of births, recall each cry with clarity. Their memories are laced with stories. A girl born with a voice like thunder, now grown tall and healthy. A boy whose first sound was barely more than a gasp, carried to burial before his first spring. Each new birth is layered atop all those that have come before, the pattern repeating with subtle variations, lending comfort or sorrow, but always guiding the early days of care. Sometimes, a child defies the pattern, the baby whose first cry was faint, but who grows into a sturdy toddler, becomes a kind of legend, a tale told to soften the sharp edges of the old belief. Yet, more often than not, the community's memory is shaped by the stories that confirm what they already expect. That fate declares itself in those first trembling moments, that fortune or hardship can be heard in the very first sound a child makes. Among wealthier families, the ritual is little different. Midwives are paid handsomely, rooms are cleaner and quieter. But the hush as all wait for that first cry is the same. Sometimes a doctor is present, his knowledge greater, his remedies more varied, yet his relief or concern mirrors that of the midwife, shaped by the same ancient anxieties, the same hope that the child's voice will be strong. Historians, looking back, find only scattered traces of these beliefs. Notes in parish records, the odd letter, or a midwife's journal remarking that the boy cried weakly and all hearts were troubled. Archaeologists might find amulets sewn into blankets, or small charms buried with infants lost in their first days. The stories, mostly, live on in the quiet traditions of families, passed in whispers, softened by time. If you imagine yourself in that early light, listening for the first cry, you may sense the weight of history that settles on every birth. The hope, the worry, the deep wish that each child might defy the odds. The first sound that fills the room is more than a sign of life. It is, for a moment, the voice of fate itself. The midwife listens, and in that listening, the rhythm of the past continues, guiding the hands and hearts of all those gathered close. And as the sun rises and the world returns to its slow, steady pace, the belief endures. Each newborn's voice a promise or a warning, shaping not only how they are welcomed, but how they are remembered, long after their first cry has faded into memory. Fearing that an owl calling at dusk foretold death. Imagine a countryside settling into dusk, the fields dimming to a soft blur, hedgerows deepening to shadow, and the last color lingering on the sky's edge before slipping away. In this hour, as night quietly claims the land, families gather close inside low, thatched cottages. The world outside grows quiet and still, save for the gentle crackle of fire in the hearth and the low murmur of conversation winding down for the day. Children are called indoors, the last chores finished in fading light, and doors are closed against the evening's chill. It is in this tranquil, half-lit hour that a sound might drift through the air. A soft, haunting hoot, rising and falling from somewhere in the nearby trees. The owl, patient and unseen, calls to the deepening dusk. In our modern age, this might be a curious, even comforting sound, a sign of wildlife at home in the darkness. But for families long ago, the owl's call was different, an old, cold signal that could freeze a room into silence. In village after village, it was believed that an owl calling near a home, especially at dusk, foretold death. Someone inside, it was said, would soon be gone. This belief was not a fleeting superstition, but a deep, enduring anxiety woven into the fabric of rural life. The owl, with its pale face and silent flight, belonged to the night, a realm both practical and mysterious. Darkness held many dangers: illness, hunger, accident, and the slow, invisible passage of time. The owl's call seemed to announce that the veil between life and death was thinning, that fate itself had turned its gaze toward the house. Inside, families would hush, conversation slowed, hands stilled over bread and mending. Grandparents and elders, keepers of custom, might cross themselves or murmur a prayer beneath their breath. Some would grip small amulets, reach for a sprig of protective herb hung by the door, or recite a rhyme passed down through generations. Children, sensing the sudden tension, would cling closer, uncertain but infected by the fear they saw in adult faces. The night that followed such a call was rarely restful. Sleep, when it came, was thin and light, broken by each shift of wind or crack of the fire. Mothers watched over children, fathers listened for further signs. A second hoot, perhaps, or the scratch of talons on the roof. The owl itself remained unseen, hidden high in the branches, its song drifting again on the wind, untouched by the dread it sowed below. In the morning, the feeling lingered. Some households would quietly sweep the thresholds or sprinkle ashes along the doorstep, ancient acts of warding against misfortune. Meals might be eaten in silence, and visitors, if they came, would hear the news. The owl had called last night. Who will it be? Neighbors might whisper as they passed, each hoping it would not be their own door the omen had marked. Not every call led to tragedy. Most, in fact, faded into memory, another layer of worry in lives already shaped by uncertainty. But from time to time, fate did seem to follow the owl's song. A lingering illness would suddenly turn, or an old man fail to wake. The connection, once believed, only deepened the superstition. Stories circulated of those who ignored the warning, only to find sorrow on their doorstep days later. The belief gained new details: how many hoots, which direction the owl faced, what it meant if it called 3 nights in a row. Over centuries, the owl took on many meanings in folklore and custom. Some said its call could be diverted if a shoe was thrown at the door. or if a candle was kept burning through the night. Others believed the owl could be bribed away, offered scraps, or a whispered plea. In some places, the owl became a messenger, neither good nor evil, but a necessary bridge between the worlds, respected and feared in equal measure. Yet, even in dread, there was a strange comfort in the ritual. The shared anxiety brought families closer, the familiar gestures of protection and prayer grounding them in something larger than themselves. Night after night, the rhythm continued. Dusk deepened, the owl called, and lives were measured out between hope and fear, faith and uncertainty. For the owl, of course, it was simply the hour to hunt. Unseen above the rooftops, it swept low over fields and meadows, searching with silent wings for the rustle of a mouse or vole. Its call was neither curse nor prophecy, but the quiet assertion of life continuing in darkness, its own survival balanced against the stories told in candlelit rooms below. To the people, though, the sound never lost its chill. Even those who doubted, who laughed at old superstitions by day, might feel a shiver run down their spine when the owl's hoot echoed through the evening air. In a world shaped by uncertainty, every sign mattered. Every shadow carried the weight of meaning. As you drift now towards sleep, imagine the countryside shrouded in night. The flickering warmth of firelight, the soft hush inside, the distant, timeless call of the owl. Picture the way families listened, the way fear and hope lived side by side in the quiet hours between dusk and dawn. Remember that even the gentlest superstition has its roots in the rhythms of daily life, shaping how people understood the world and their place within it. Let yourself settle gently into the hush of old rooms and dark fields. The owl's call fades to memory, and the night continues on, just as it always has, carrying stories, dreams, and the soft, watchful waiting of those who listen, believing that bread baked unevenly showed witchcraft. Imagine yourself waking in the quiet hush before dawn in a small medieval village. The sky is still deep with the last shadows of night, and only a faint line of gray on the horizon hints that another day is about to begin. The world around you is slow to stir. Somewhere, a rooster crows. From the low, thatched cottages, thin trails of smoke begin to rise as hearth fires are coaxed back to life, pushing against the lingering cold. In many homes, the first task of the day is the making of bread, a task both ordinary and quietly monumental. Grain is measured carefully, water drawn from the well is added to flour, and the dough is kneaded with practiced hands. The process is a kind of daily prayer, a hope for nourishment, and a reminder of the rhythms that bind the family to the earth, to one another, and to all those who came before. Picture the scene inside a cottage. A woman bends over her wooden table, dusted with flour. She works the dough slowly, folding and pressing it, her fingers worn but steady. The air is thick with the soft, yeasty smell of rising bread, mingling with a faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth. In some households, the dough is set to rest in a wooden bowl near the fire, covered with a faded cloth. In others, it will be carried, along with the dough of several neighbors, to the communal oven, a great stone structure at the heart of the village, whose heat is shared and watched over by many. Baking bread is not only a necessity, it is an act of skill, reputation, and quiet pride. The appearance of each loaf matters deeply. Bread that rises tall and even is more than just sustenance. It is a symbol of a housewife's care, her wisdom, and her connection to the mysterious forces that govern the world. When the loaf emerges from the oven golden and whole, there is a sense of relief and satisfaction. But if the bread is uneven, lopsided, sunken, or burned on one side, a different current runs through the village. Whispers begin with small things. A loaf with a deep crack along its side, a misshapen round. A dark line where dough rose too quickly and then collapsed. In the modern world, such mishaps are attributed to the unpredictability of yeast, the humidity of the day, or the quirks of a fickle oven. But for many in the medieval village, bread gone awry can mean something more. It is a sign to be read, a warning, perhaps, of hidden malice or the subtle workings of forces beyond understanding. The belief that an uneven loaf signals witchcraft is not born out of malice, but of uncertainty. Life is precarious. Crops fail. Illness spreads without warning. Bad luck comes in streaks, lingering over one household while sparing another. In a world where so much is unknown and so little is within one's control, people reach for explanations. And so, a lopsided loaf, when all others come out right, can feel like a message, a sign that someone somehow has meddled with fate. Imagine the housewife whose bread has gone awry. She stands in the door of her cottage, watching as her family picks at the misshapen loaf, glancing sidelong at the neighbors who will notice. The unease spreads quietly as word makes its way through the village. Perhaps a child remarks that the bread tastes different. Perhaps an older neighbor, eyes sharp with memory, recalls other times when bread failed and trouble followed. Reputation is a fragile thing, built up over years and lost in an instant. For some women, the stain of a single unlucky loaf lingers. There may be whispered jokes or averted eyes at the well, a certain coolness in conversation. Sometimes, the charge is voiced aloud. Accusations that the dough was cursed, that the hearth was shadowed, that the baker herself is marked by misfortune. In a few cases, the suspicion never fades. A woman whose bread bakes unevenly more than once may find herself slowly pushed to the margins of village life. Never outright shunned, perhaps, but never quite trusted again. Yet for most, life continues with its gentle, cyclical rhythms. The oven is cleaned, the dough is made anew, and the hope for an even loaf persists. The suspicion that hovers over a lopsided loaf is balanced by the comfort of shared work and the routines that draw people together. Women gather at the communal oven, sharing tips, stories, and old superstitions. Pinch a bit of salt for luck. Always turn the loaf before the final rise. Never bake on the dark of the moon. Over time, the village learns to navigate these undercurrents of anxiety and belief. Most loaves turn out well. The odd failure is excused, put down to bad grain, poor luck, or an inattentive moment. But the memory remains, woven quietly into the fabric of daily life. A reminder of how little separates order from chaos, community from suspicion. As dusk falls, the scent of baking lingers over the village, blending with the cool night air. In the lamplight, families gather to share the evening meal, breaking bread and passing it from hand to hand. The loaf, whether perfectly risen or slightly uneven, remains a symbol of both sustenance and vulnerability, the comfort of tradition and the anxiety of a world always just a little bit out of balance. And as you drift into sleep, imagine the gentle hush of the village night, the slow crackle of the dying fire, and the enduring hope that tomorrow's loaf will rise whole and unmarked. Nourishment for the body and reassurance for the fragile bonds that tie the village together, loaf by loaf, year after year. Assuming that left-handedness was proof of secret sin. Imagine yourself seated beside the hearth in a modest home, centuries ago, as the early morning sun trickles through small, wavy panes of glass. The fire is already burning, filling the room with gentle warmth and the faint, familiar scent of wood smoke and baking bread. Children gather at a rough-hewn table, preparing for the day's chores or simple lessons. There is a softness to the scene. The hum of conversation, the rustle of skirts, the low laughter of siblings at play. Yet, hidden within this ordinary moment, a quiet unease threads its way through the air. It is the simple matter of which hand a child favors. In a time shaped by unspoken codes and ancient fears, left-handedness is more than a curiosity. It is a trait that draws the eye, invites whispers, and stirs old anxieties. A child who naturally reaches for a spoon, a quill, or a spindle with the left hand is seldom left to their own devices. Instead, their movements are watched with quiet suspicion. sometimes from the moment they first grasp at a rattle or reach for a parent's hand. Parents, shaped by the customs and cautions of their own upbringing, respond not with curiosity, but with worry. Stories pass from generation to generation that the left hand is the sinister hand, associated with misfortune, darkness, or even the devil himself. The right hand is honored, linked to honesty, blessing, and order. The left, by contrast, is shadowed by old beliefs that speak of secret sins or hidden shame. Children quickly learn the rules, sometimes gently, often harshly. Imagine the scene. A mother takes notice as her daughter stirs the pot with her left hand. Quietly but firmly, she removes the spoon and places it in the child's right. At school or in church, a left-handed student who makes the sign of the cross with the wrong hand may draw a sharp word or a stinging switch. Lessons in letters and numbers are repeated, not until mastery, but until the left hand is subdued, sometimes tied, sometimes struck, sometimes shamed into silence. For the child, the world becomes a puzzle of small corrections and cautious movements. Every task is shadowed by the need to appear proper, to suppress instinct in favor of expectation. The effort is constant. Reaching for a cup, sweeping a floor, writing a name. Sometimes at night, a parent checks to see that a child sleeps with their right hand above the covers, a small safeguard against waking with left-handed habits renewed. In private moments, parents confide their worries to one another. "He is clever but stubborn," a father might say, glancing anxiously at his son. "She favors her left hand. Do you think it's a sign?" Others offer well-meaning advice, shaped by folk wisdom and fear. Remedies are suggested. Special prayers, charms, even the bitter taste of ink on the fingers to discourage their use. Yet, beneath the surface, there lingers a persistent anxiety. The fear that this innocent trait might mark a child for a life of struggle, or worse, as one somehow set apart from the rest. Neighbors, too, notice and remember. A left-handed child may be quietly avoided, their family pitted or, at times, blamed for imagined misfortunes. Whispers travel quickly. "Did you see how she threads her needle? He always uses the wrong hand for his tools." These small observations become fuel for stories, and sometimes, sadly, for lifelong exclusion. As children grow, the lessons leave their mark. Many learn to adapt, to hide their left-handedness behind careful practice. A few never quite manage, living with the quiet shame of being corrected again and again, carrying the memory of disapproval into adulthood. Even then, the habit of caution persists, offering a greeting with the right hand, avoiding the attention that might come from a slip in public. Yet, for all the effort, the left hand remains, stronger for the struggle, quieter but never wholly erased. Some find small comforts in the secrecy of their difference, mastering skills in private, or excelling at tasks that allow them to work unnoticed. Others carry the wounds more deeply, the sense of being marked by something both innate and unwelcome. In rare moments of kindness, a grandparent or friend may offer reassurance, a gentle word that all hands are made by the same creator, or a story of a great ancestor who was said to favor the left. Such moments linger in memory, small bulwarks against the tide of correction and suspicion. Over time, the world shifts and new ideas begin to soften old fears. Yet, the traces of the past remain, in the language of right and wrong, in the quiet unease that still accompanies difference, in the hand-deadness of daily life. Archaeologists, historians, and storytellers now look back on these customs with a mixture of sadness and understanding. They find, in the worn handles of tools and the leftward slant of ancient script, the hidden history of countless lives shaped by a simple, misunderstood trait. The quiet courage of those who learned to use both hands, or who bore the weight of correction in silence, becomes part of the broader story. A reminder of how even the smallest difference can shape a life, and how slowly the world learns to let go of its fears. As you settle into rest, Imagine the gentle hush of a candlelit room, the soft clatter of breakfast dishes, and the quiet persistence of those who, long ago, learned to walk the line between instinct and expectation. In every age, it is these subtle struggles, fought not in the open, but in daily acts and unspoken hopes, that shape the history of ordinary lives. Let the memory of their patience and quiet strength guide you into sleep, and remember that every hand, left or right, tells a story of endurance, courage, and the long, slow work of understanding, trusting that dreams of teeth falling out predicted death. Imagine yourself in a small house, lit softly by the early light of morning, where the rhythm of life is set by old beliefs and gentle routines. The day begins much as any other. Embers are coaxed into warmth, water is fetched, and the first scent of bread drifts from the hearth. Yet sometimes, something subtle and unseen shifts the atmosphere, casting a hush over even the simplest tasks. The cause is not illness or a visitor at the door, but a dream, one that lingers long after sleep has faded. In many homes, across villages and towns, dreams hold a power almost as real as any storm or sickness. Among the most quietly feared is a dream of teeth falling out. When someone wakes from such a vision, mouth empty, tongue searching for gaps that aren't there, a kind of chill settles in. The dream is spoken of softly, sometimes not at all, but word always finds its way through the household. Eyes meet over breakfast, gestures slow, and the gentle background hum of daily chores grows subdued. There is an old belief, passed from generation to generation, that such dreams foretell death. No one can say precisely where the idea began or how it took root, but its hold is unmistakable. The logic is as dreamlike as the omen itself. Teeth, the mark of youth and health, are lost only at life's end. To lose them in a dream must be a warning from something unseen. The rhythm of their lives, shaped by seasons and scarcity, bends quietly to this private anxiety. You can picture the day that follows such a night. A mother, usually brisk and efficient, moves with a distracted air. Children sense the tension, their laughter quieted, their games less bold. Meals are eaten in near silence, each bite feeling heavy, as though appetite itself has been touched by the dream. Sometimes, elders consult old books or recall other times when a dream of teeth led, inevitably, to a loss within the family or among neighbors. Preparations begin, not with panic, but with a calm, methodical care. Clothing is washed and set aside. Bread is baked in greater quantity. Candles are trimmed and ready. It is not uncommon for a neighbor to visit, sensing the change in atmosphere and offering gentle consolation, neither dismissing the dream nor stoking its fear. The household turns inward, watching for any sign, a cough, a stumble, a sudden silence, that might fulfill the night's warning. In this way, the dream casts a long shadow. Sometimes, the living are neglected as attention drifts to the imagined future. Children are shushed, stories are left untold, laughter is stifled. Chores are done with less urgency, as though the ordinary tasks of the day have lost their meaning in the face of a greater inevitability. The rhythm of their lives is marked by this gentle unease, a quiet waiting for what may, or may not, come to pass. Yet, as days pass and life continues, the tension gradually loosens. Perhaps a week goes by, and no news arrives, no illness takes hold. Slowly, hope seeps back into daily routine. Laughter returns in fragments, stories are shared once more, and the dream's power fades to memory. But its lesson is not forgotten. The next time someone wakes with the taste of loss upon their tongue, the household will remember, and the quiet ritual will repeat. For historians, these beliefs are often footnotes in the story of a people, markers of how dreams and superstitions shaped the everyday. But for those who lived them, the dreams held a meaning that transcended explanation, binding the household together in shared anxiety and care. There is a kind of comfort in ritual, even when it is born of fear. The preparation for loss becomes a way to face uncertainty, to honor the power of dreams, and to move gently through the unknown. As evening falls and the house grows quiet again, you can imagine the soft sound of breathing in the dark, the quiet hope that dreams will be lighter, kinder, and that the rhythm of life will resume its gentle, familiar pattern. In this way, belief, superstition, and the ordinary persistence of daily life blend into a tapestry both fragile and enduring. So as you drift towards sleep, picture that household, holding its breath after a dream, tending to old rituals, and waiting for dawn. The rhythm of their lives continues, marked by the silent weight of dreams, the care of quiet preparation, and the enduring hope that each morning brings. Believing that bees must be told of their keeper's death. Imagine a gentle morning in the countryside, dew still clinging to the long grass as sunlight slips quietly over orchard walls. The house is hushed, windows drawn, the kitchen empty save for the faint echo of yesterday's voices. Yet outside, near the edge of a tangled garden or beneath the leaning boughs of old fruit trees, another world is waking, a world of bees, humming softly in the cool air, moving in and out of the weathered hives set carefully among the blooms. In such places, for generation after generation, families tended their bees as carefully as their children. Hives were built and repaired with quiet pride. Honey harvested in late summer was a treasure, divided with ritual care among neighbors and kin. The bees themselves were more than mere livestock. They were woven into the fabric of home, so much so that, across villages and centuries, a curious belief took hold. When the master or mistress of the house died, the bees must be told. If not, it was said, the hives would sour, the honey would spoil, or the bees might abandon their boxes altogether, vanishing into the wild as a silent protest. When death came to a household, grief hung heavy and practical matters pressed close. A burial to arrange, debts to reckon, rooms to clear and settle. But for many, tending to the bees was as essential as comforting a child or tending the hearth. Someone, a neighbor, a relative, sometimes a child who had listened closely to old stories, would be given the task. With slow steps, perhaps in borrowed black, they'd make their way from the house to the hives, passing through grass still damp and uncut. There was a rhythm to the ritual, learned through quiet repetition. The mourner would pause before each hive, perhaps tapping gently on the wooden box or lifting the cloth covering the entrance. In a voice barely above a whisper, the news would be given. Your master is dead. Sometimes the message was softened, shaped into a small poem or prayer, or woven with details. Your mistress is gone. She will not come to tend you again. The words were simple, but spoken with the conviction that the bees understood, and that the boundary between the world of people and the world of insects was thin and easily bruised by neglect. In some households, a strip of black cloth was draped over the hive or tied to a nearby branch, a small signal of mourning. In others, families left a little taste of the funeral meal, a crumb of cake, a drop of sweet wine, set just beside the hive entrance, a gesture of sharing grief and memory with their most faithful workers. Some believed that failure to mark the bees' loss would bring calamity. Swarms lost, honey ruined, or a long run of bad luck shadowing the household for seasons to come. For the keeper of bees, this ritual was a matter of gentle reciprocity. The bees had been present through every change in the household. Weddings, births, hard winters, and lush springs. Their hum had filled the air at dawn and dusk. Their honey had sweetened bread and soothed throats in sickness. Telling them of a death was not only an act of superstition, but of respect, a way to maintain the delicate thread of trust between human and hive. You can picture the scene. A mourner pausing in the gold-lit quiet, whispering news to each hive in turn, the bees swirling and settling as if listening in their own way. The process is slow, repetitive, almost meditative. In the hush of grief, it offers a brief solace, a moment to step outside the tangled press of sorrow and perform a duty both humble and profound. Among wealthier families, the practice changed little. Grand gardens or estate apiaries might boast rows of painted hives, their entrances marked with bright numbers or carved crests, but the belief endured. Even when servants managed the bees, word was sent, through the head gardener or a trusted maid, that the bees must be told, and the hives draped for mourning. Payment for such a service was not resented. It was considered part of the necessary work of honoring the household, as vital as tolling the bell or laying out black ribbons in the parlor. The custom itself crossed borders and centuries, surfacing in rural England, in parts of France and Germany, and in scattered corners of the wider world. Historians find it referenced in diaries and folk tales, in letters sent between distant relatives. "Be sure the bees are told," one might read, or "we have mourned, and so must they." The records are rarely formal, but the traces linger. In black silk scraps tucked into old beekeeping ledgers, in the faded edge of a photograph showing hives draped for mourning, in the recipes for honey cakes served at wakes. Archaeologists, when they stumble upon remnants of old hives or apiaries, find it harder to trace the custom. But in the stories passed down, the ones told by candlelight or over cups of tea, the practice is remembered, softened by time into legend and lullaby. Some say that, in houses where the bees were well told and gently treated, fortunes prospered. Others recount tales of ill luck following families who neglected this simple courtesy. If you imagine yourself as the bearer of news, walking quietly through dew and shadow, you may sense the comfort such a ritual brings. The act is small, almost invisible, but it knits the living and the dead, the human and the hive, into a single pattern of respect. The bees hum on, working as they always have, but something in the world feels steadier for the telling, and so the custom endures. In moments of grief, as windows are shuttered and clocks are stopped, the bees are not forgotten. Their hives are visited, their loyalty acknowledged, and the boundaries of sorrow shared. In the hush that follows, as the bees return to their endless work, the family, too, begins to move forward, carried, if only a little, by the quiet rhythm of tradition, by the knowledge that every sorrow is lightened when shared, even with the smallest companions of home. Fearing that meeting a cross-eyed stranger was an evil omen. Imagine an old country road, pale with morning mist, winding its way between hedgerows heavy with dew. The earth is soft beneath your feet, and every step stirs the faint scent of crushed grass and distant wood smoke. In this quiet world, where travel was often a slow, solitary journey, every stranger met along the way took on a subtle, almost magical importance. Travelers, burdened with their own errands and uncertainties, watched the road ahead with a kind of alert hope, attuned to every detail that might signal luck or danger. In the old days, before science unraveled so many mysteries, the world was thick with signs. Birds that flew overhead, the weather at dawn, the first voice heard upon waking. Each was studied for hints of what the day might hold. But of all the unspoken superstitions that shaped daily travel, few were more quietly unsettling than the fear of meeting a cross-eyed stranger. The belief was simple but persistent. To cross paths with someone whose eyes did not align was to invite misfortune, a subtle twist in one's fate that could shadow the day, or even longer. Stories about the evil omen of a cross-eyed encounter drifted from village to village, sometimes whispered by mothers to anxious children, sometimes murmured over mugs in the safety of a tavern. The glance itself was said to carry power, a glance that might knot the smooth thread of luck, tangling a person's fortunes in ways impossible to untie. Some claimed that milk would sour, that tools would break, or that journeys would go astray. Others believed that such a meeting could send a traveler home empty-handed, or worse, draw them into accidents or disputes that seemed to arise from nowhere. In practice, the fear created a gentle choreography along the roads and lanes. Travelers who glimpsed a cross-eyed figure coming toward them might find a reason to pause. A shoe that needed tightening, a bundle that needed to be checked, a sudden need to consult a hedgerow or a patch of wildflowers. In towns and at crossroads, more cautious souls might turn back entirely, preferring a long detour over the risk of a twisted glance. If turning back was impossible, some would make a quiet sign of protection, touching a charm in a pocket or murmuring a line of prayer. Within families, remedies and countermeasures grew up alongside the fear. It was said that spitting over one's left shoulder could undo the bad luck, or that turning one's own gaze downward at the critical moment would shield the soul from harm. A coin pressed into the palm, a sprig of rue, or a quickly whispered blessing. Each became part of the ritual armor that travelers carried, subtle comforts against unseen dangers. For those born with eyes that wandered, life moved under a quiet shadow. In villages where everyone was known, the fear might soften into familiarity, a part of the background hum of gossip and gentle caution. But on the open road, among strangers, the sense of otherness was more keenly felt. Some learned to keep their gaze low, to step aside and wait for others to pass, aware that their presence could shift the mood of an entire day. Stories lingered of peddlers, tinkers, or lonely wanderers who struggled to make a living, not for want of goods, but for the glances that trailed behind them like invisible threads. Yet, despite the weight of superstition, ordinary kindness persisted. Not every traveler believed, and not every meeting ended in averted eyes. Some would pause to offer a friendly greeting, to share a crust of bread or a few words about the road ahead. Slowly, as years passed and the world became more settled, the old fear softened, giving way to curiosity, acceptance, or simple indifference. Still, the shadow of the belief remained, passed down in old sayings and the careful rituals of the cautious. Parents continued to warn their children, and travelers continued to read the world for signs. The landscape itself became part of the story. A twist in the path, a stand of trees, the silence before a meeting. Even now, when such fears are half forgotten, they linger in the language of luck and the subtle ways people watch the world. If you listen closely in imagination, you might hear the soft shuffle of footsteps on the morning road, the distant call of a bird, the gentle hush that falls as two travelers approach, and, perhaps, one quietly slips aside. There is no malice in the act, only the echo of an ancient fear, and the human longing to move through the day untouched by trouble. In the end, most journeys pass without incident, the threads of fate unwinding in their quiet patterns. The sun climbs higher, the road grows warmer, and the encounters of the early morning fade into memory. The cross-eyed stranger, if remembered at all, becomes just another detail in a story told by firelight, a fragment of an older, slower world. So, as you drift into sleep, picture the winding roads of that time. The hush of dawn, the slow approach of strangers, the gentle web of beliefs that shaped every step. Let the old superstitions settle softly around you, as harmless now as the mist on distant fields. Their power held only in the stories people told to keep the world a little less uncertain and a little more their own, assuming that a sudden itch meant gossip or betrayal. Imagine yourself in a small medieval village as the afternoon sun warms the crooked lanes and the slow, steady routines of daily life. It is the kind of place where everyone knows everyone else, where news and rumor pass through open windows and under doors, never truly resting. The cottages stand close, their walls thick with the memory of generations, the gardens brimming with herbs and the scent of old earth. Somewhere nearby, a rooster calls, and the faint clang of a smithy echoes down the lane. In this world, the line between fact and belief is thin, worn smooth by habit and the mysteries of daily existence. Among the many quiet superstitions that wove themselves into the fabric of life, few are as quietly persistent as the notion that a sudden itch, a tingle of the palm, a twitch of the ear, meant more than just a passing bodily sensation. For many, it signaled that somewhere, someone was talking. Not just talking, but talking about you. You might imagine yourself, resting after a morning's work, rubbing your hand absent-mindedly against your sleeve when a sharp itch blooms across your palm. It is just a moment, easily ignored, but here it takes on a deeper meaning. Grandmothers mutter old sayings. An itching right palm brings money, but an itching left means words are flying about you, somewhere out of sight. An itch of the ear, especially the right, suggests your name has surfaced in another's mouth, perhaps kindly, perhaps not. The sense that unseen conversations ripple just out of reach is never far from mind. In villages where privacy is rare, where windows gape and walls are thin, the fear of gossip is as real as the wind that slips beneath the door at night. Even the most mundane act, fetching water, sharing bread, tending a garden, can become the stuff of whispered stories, shaped and reshaped as they travel from hearth to hearth. Imagine a group of women gathered near the communal well, their voices low, laughter mingling with the splash of water. The conversation drifts from weather to harvests, from the affairs of distant lords to the news of who fell ill last winter. Then, one of them pauses, fingers rising to scratch an ear, a thoughtful frown crossing her brow. She remembers her mother's warning. Beware the sudden itch. Someone speaks your name, perhaps twisting your story into something less kind. It is easy to see how such beliefs settle into daily life, subtle and persistent. An itch becomes a signal, a pause in the rhythm of work. Friendships, already fragile under the weight of hardship and close quarters, strain beneath the pressure of imagined slights. If a neighbor seems cool, or a friend suddenly distant, the mind drifts back to the sensation, a prickling palm, an insistent itch behind the ear, and wonders who might be whispering just out of sight. Sometimes, these worries are voiced aloud, wrapped in the half-joking phrases of superstition. "My ear is burning," someone says with a wry smile. "Who's talking about me now?" But the laughter is nervous, a thin veneer over real unease. For in a world where reputation is currency, where a rumor can linger longer than winter frost, the smallest suggestion of gossip or betrayal can leave a mark. The itch, whether palm or ear, becomes a crossroads of feeling, a place where imagination, fear, and the need for connection all meet. It is a way of giving shape to uncertainty, of explaining the unexplainable. If a friend withdraws, if a favor is not returned, if the air in a room feels suddenly cold, surely someone has been talking. Surely a story has traveled, lightly as a breeze, and landed where it can do quiet harm. Yet life goes on, shaped by both trust and suspicion. The village wakes each morning to the same routines. Bread is baked, animals tended, fields worked. People greet each other in the lanes, their smiles sometimes genuine, sometimes tinged with caution. The itch comes and goes, a signal that may mean nothing or everything, depending on the day and the mood. Over time, these beliefs settle into the gentle repetition of community life. The itch is not only a warning, but a shared language, a subtle way to name the ever-present possibility of misunderstanding. It is part of the ongoing negotiation that is friendship in a small, closely watched world. A reminder that words, even unspoken, have weight, and that trust is a thing built slowly, eroded quickly, and always in need of tending. Children learn these lessons early, watching elders react to sudden itches with knowing glances or quiet jokes. They learn to listen for the shift in tone, the pause in conversation, the moment when a hand rises to scratch and an old saying is whispered. The rituals of checking, of reassuring, become habits that persist long after the sensation has faded. Imagine, as dusk settles over the village, the homes glowing faintly with candlelight. Inside, families gather around the table, sharing the news of the day, the small triumphs and disappointments. In the pause between stories, someone absently scratches an ear, and a ripple of silent thought passes around the circle. Who spoke? Who listened? What words drifted in the quiet beyond these walls? Outside, the air grows cool, and the village slips into uneasy sleep. The itch, whether remembered or real, lingers as a faint echo of all that is left unspoken. The gentle, sometimes painful ties that hold a community together, even as they pull it quietly apart. As you drift into sleep, let your mind wander through these gentle rhythms. The slow swirl of rumor and reassurance, the comfort of old sayings, and the small, enduring mysteries of daily life. In a world where so much is uncertain, even a sudden itch becomes a way of feeling seen, of knowing that you are woven, however lightly, into the stories that shape the village night after night, year after year. Imagine yourself in a quiet cottage in the countryside. Many centuries ago, the day has ended, and darkness settles gently over the hills and lanes. Inside the home, the fire in the hearth has been banked low, and the only light that remains comes from a single candle flickering on the wooden table. Its glow is soft and uneven, casting warm golden circles that reach only so far before dissolving into shadow. The air is still, thick with a scent of smoke, beeswax, and earth. Candles in this world are not taken for granted. Each one is made with care, tallow or beeswax, shaped by hand, often from stores kept carefully for winter. A candle's flame represents more than light. It stands for safety, for presence, for the quiet rhythm of home. It is the thread that connects the waking world to sleep, the circle of warmth against the unknown. And so, when a candle goes out before its time, without wind, without touch, it does not go unnoticed. In this time, belief moves like breath through the house. Invisible, constant, and felt, people live close to silence and to darkness, and within those spaces, old understandings linger. If a candle's flame vanishes suddenly, snuffed out not by draft or accident, but by some force unseen, there is no laughter, no shrug or joke. Instead, there is a pause, soft and solemn. Eyes scan the room. Hands grow still. Someone might murmur, "Leave it," or "best not to stay." For many, such an extinguishing is not chance but sign. A presence, perhaps, moving silently through the room. Not angry, necessarily, but aware, watching. The candles going out is seen as a signal. A moment when the veil between worlds thins just enough for something else to brush past. To some, it means a warning. To others, a reminder. We are not alone. Imagine a family, gathered for supper or prayers, the candles steady one moment, gone the next. No wind, no movement, just the sudden loss of light. Perhaps no one speaks at first. Then, quietly, someone rises. The children are guided out. The door is closed behind them. The room is left as it is, untouched until morning. This is not fear in the modern sense, but reverence, a custom born from long memory, passed down in quiet phrases and shared silences. These beliefs are not written down. They are learned by watching, by listening to what is not said. Children grow up sensing the subtle shifts of mood when such things happen. A grandmother might cross herself without a word. A father might shake his head once slowly, before lighting a new candle in a different room. And sometimes, the moment is left unspoken, folded into the rhythm of the night like so many other rituals. Stirring a pot clockwise, leaving bread for unseen guests, knocking on wood. Such customs are not universal, but they are common. In towns and villages, in manors and cottages, stories circulate. A man once stayed too long in a room after the candle died and was found the next morning, wide-eyed and speechless. A woman who laughed when the flame vanished later fell ill. Whether true or not, these stories endure because they make sense of the things that cannot be explained. The creak in the floorboards, the sudden chill, the memory of a face not seen in years. In many homes, the candle itself is treated with quiet care. Some say you should never relight a candle that has gone out on its own, for fear of drawing attention. Others insist the remains of such candles must be buried or burned completely, lest their power linger. Each household has its version, shaped by region, by ancestry, by the patchwork of belief that stretches through the centuries like old cloth, mended, faded, and still used. And yet, life continues. The morning comes. The room, so carefully avoided the night before, is entered again. The bed is made. The hearth is swept. The candle stub is removed. But perhaps a fresh sprig of rosemary is left near the window, or a small bowl of salt set discreetly in the corner. These are not superstitions, not exactly. They are habits of care, quiet ways of acknowledging that the world is deeper and more layered than it first appears. For some, the extinguished candle becomes a turning point, a sign that something is shifting, that attention must be paid. For others, it is simply part of the natural fabric of things, no more frightening than thunder or a sudden breeze. But always, the moment is respected, folded gently into the day's memory, and carried forward with quiet awareness. These beliefs, passed down through generations, often outlive the reasons that once explained them, even in times when new knowledge arrives, science, printing, medicine. There remains a place in the human heart for mystery, for caution, for the kind of respect that only silence can express. A candle's flame, once gone, leaves not just shadow, but a question. Who, if anyone, was here? As centuries pass, and the houses grow quiet with dust, archaeologists may find the traces of these rituals in forgotten corners. Bundles of herbs behind stones, scorched wood beneath thresholds, candle stubs buried in earth. They read these signs not as superstition, but as testament to how deeply belief once shaped daily life, to how light, and its loss, could hold meaning. So now, as your eyes grow heavy, imagine the soft flicker of a candle in a still room, the hush that follows its vanishing, and the care with which the family steps away, out of fear, out of respect, out of love for the world's quiet mysteries. In every age, people have lived not only by sunlight and logic, but by small moments of wonder and caution. Let your thoughts rest there now, in the gentle dark, where stories sleep beside the flame, waiting to be remembered only when the room is quiet again, trusting that sneezing once was bad luck without a blessing. Imagine yourself seated at a rough-hewn wooden table in a quiet cottage, the morning light filtering through a small, uneven window pane. The air carries the faint smell of wood smoke and lavender hung to dry near the hearth. The household is slowly waking. Someone stirs in the next room. A kettle begins to warm on the coals, and outside, birds call softly from the thatched rooftop. And then, somewhere in the stillness, a sudden sound breaks the calm, a single sharp sneeze. At once, the atmosphere changes. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Heads lift, glances are exchanged, and someone nearby quickly murmurs a blessing. Not out of habit or politeness, but out of quiet necessity. For in this world, a sneeze is not just a bodily function. It is a moment when the soul might falter. For centuries, many believed that the soul and the body were linked by a thread so fine, so delicate, that the force of a sneeze could momentarily loosen it. Just for an instant, the spirit could drift, exposed to danger, to wandering illness, or to the watchful eyes of unseen forces. Without a blessing to call it back, the sneezer was thought to be vulnerable, spiritually open, unguarded, incomplete. The rhythm of their lives adapted to this belief. In villages and towns alike, children were taught early that a sneeze was never to be ignored. If someone sneezed and no one responded, even strangers might murmur a soft, almost automatic phrase, "God bless you," or its local equivalent, spoken gently, not just for comfort, but for protection. To say nothing was considered more than impolite. It was, in a quiet way, dangerous. It was especially true with a single sneeze. 2 sneezes might be dismissed as irritation, 3 a brewing cold, but 1 lone sneeze, abrupt and isolated, carried a different kind of weight. It was sudden, unexpected, unaccompanied, a signal, perhaps, that the balance of the body had shifted just enough to matter. You can picture the moment in a crowded market square. a merchant arranging his wares, a sneeze echoing across the cobblestones, and 3 people, without turning, without thinking, uttering blessings under their breath. The sneezer might nod in thanks or say nothing at all. The exchange is wordless, habitual, woven into the rhythm of the day. Within the home, the ritual is even more familiar. Around the table, or by the hearth, a sneeze might draw blessings from every corner of the room, each voice soft and steady, as if layering protection over the moment. Some families had their own special phrases, rhymed lines, old sayings, or words handed down from generations before. The exact wording mattered less than the intent, to call the soul home. In some places, those who sneezed without receiving a blessing were advised to touch wood, cross themselves, or hold their breath for a count of 3. A sneeze left unanswered could bring unease, lingering long after the moment had passed. Illness caught within the week might be blamed on the lapse. Misfortune in the home, however small, could be traced back to the blessing that wasn't said. The rhythm of their lives was gently shaped by such beliefs. No formal rules were written, no laws passed. Yet across cultures and languages, the instinct to respond, to acknowledge the sneeze and gently draw the soul back, remained steady. It was one of those customs that lived in the pauses between conversation, in the glances exchanged after an unexpected sound, in the simple habit of care for those nearby. There is something deeply human in this quiet practice. A sneeze is a moment of vulnerability. Eyes closed, breath stolen, control briefly surrendered. The blessing, whispered or spoken, is a small offering of presence. It says, "I saw that. I am here. You are still whole." Even now, in places far removed from the old fears, the habit endures. Though its origins may be forgotten, its rhythm remains. Imagine the quiet scene again. The soft light of morning, the hush of a room before the day fully begins. A sneeze, sharp and sudden. A blessing, low and steady. And then, silence once more. The rhythm of life resumes, but changed slightly. Reassured, protected, complete again. As you drift into sleep, think of the millions of such moments across time. Rooms filled with ordinary people, watching over one another in small, nearly invisible ways. The sneeze, the pause, the blessing, woven into the fabric of daily life, unspoken but understood. The rhythm of their lives continues, marked not by grand acts, but by these quiet rituals of care. Even the soul, it was believed, needed reminders of where it belonged. And so they blessed each other softly, in kitchens and markets and fields, trusting that words whispered in kindness could keep the world gently in balance. Assuming that a howling dog summoned death to the door. Imagine a village wrapped in darkness, where the only light comes from the hearths still burning low behind shuttered windows, and the faintest silver glow of moonlight on roof tiles. The world has gone still for the night. The lanes are empty, the fields silent, the wells covered. In one home, a child stirs from sleep to find the room unchanged. The blanket pulled high, the familiar shapes of chairs and shelves dimly visible. But then, across the hush of midnight, a sound slices through the stillness. A dog is howling. The cry is long, drawn from deep in the chest, and lifted into the night like a warning bell. It echoes between stone walls and across quiet gardens. Inside their homes, people pause. Conversations cease. Spoons rest motionless in bowls, and glances are exchanged with sudden gravity. The dog's howl is not just noise. It is an omen. In countless towns and villages, across centuries and regions, that sound was believed to mean only one thing. Death was on its way. You can picture the response, subtle, unspoken, but heavy with meaning. Someone closes the shutters more tightly. Someone else crosses themselves or murmurs a short, familiar prayer. Elders glance toward the fire, but say nothing. Children look to their parents, who shake their heads slowly, not to dismiss the fear, but to acknowledge it without feeding it. There is no need to explain. Everyone knows the belief. When a dog howls without reason in the night, it is summoning death to the door. This fear was not rooted in superstition alone, but in long and difficult experience. Dogs, sensitive to sound and scent beyond human comprehension, often reacted before danger was visible. A cry in the distance might be nothing, or it might be the herald of something yet unseen. A traveler fallen ill on the road, a cart carrying plague, or a household member slipping quietly toward the end of their life. When sickness lingered in a home, and a dog howled outside, families sometimes knew before the final breath that the time had come. In these moments, the dog was seen as more than animal. It was a bridge between the worlds, able to hear footsteps no one else could, or to sense the approach of something intangible. Some believed the dog could see spirits, or that it answered a call from beyond. When it lifted its voice to the sky, it was speaking in a language only fate could understand. You can imagine the tension such a belief created. If an elder was ailing, families watched not only the fever and the breath, but the movements of every dog nearby. A single howl could quiet an entire household. Some families kept their animals close at night, trying to prevent the sound. Others left offerings at thresholds, small scraps of food or whispered thanks, in the hope of appeasing whatever force might be listening. And if a dog was heard howling near a specific house, neighbors might glance toward that door with quiet dread the next morning, waiting for the first whisper of bad news. Among the poor, the fear was personal. Each death a risk to survival, each loss a wound the village would feel for months. Among the wealthy, the belief lingered, softened into folklore but no less present. Manor hounds were kept indoors during times of illness. Servants were sent to hush barking dogs. Some even believed a howling dog foretold not only death, but unrest after death, that a spirit might linger, that peace might be delayed. The practice of listening for signs, of reading the world's subtle messages, shaped the rhythm of life. A bird flying at dusk, a cracked mirror, a cold breeze in a closed room. These were all noticed, but none carried quite the same dread weight as a dog's cry after dark. It pierced deeper. It felt older, more primal, as if the sound itself belonged to something the mind could no longer explain, but still feared. When the howl ended, silence would return, heavier than before. Sleep might come slowly that night. In the morning, families would speak of it cautiously. "Did you hear the dog?" One might ask over breakfast, voice low, eyes uncertain. The reply might be a nod, or a quiet, "Yes, I heard it." Nothing more needed to be said. Sometimes the feared death did come, a grandmother already frail, slipping away before dawn. Sometimes it did not, and life resumed its slow, steady rhythm. But the memory of the howl remained, tucked into the fabric of village life, always near, always ready to return when the night grew still again. Historians find mention of the belief in old letters and village records, in superstitions passed down from grandparent to child. It appears in poems, in old trial accounts, in quiet side notes in medical diaries. A dog howled last night. The old man died by morning. It is rarely questioned, rarely analyzed. It simply is. Part of the emotional weather that moves through small communities, just as real, just as shaping as wind or rain. Archaeologists unearth little that speaks to the fear directly, but the quiet positioning of kennels, the carefully tended dog graves just beyond the house wall, the charms placed above doors. These all speak of the role animals played in the spiritual landscape. Dogs were loved, yes, but also watched closely, their behavior interpreted like the shifting of clouds or the movements of stars. If you imagine yourself standing by the fire as the sound begins, long, slow, echoing, you may understand the hush that follows. The howl seems to touch something beneath language, beneath thought, a fear older than reason. drawn from the same well of instinct that watches the shadows for movement and listens to silence for a warning. You do not speak. You simply wait. And when the sound fades, you sit again, the fear lingering, but softened now by the slow return of the ordinary. Crackling logs, quiet breath, the slow shift of night toward morning. And so, the belief endures, that when a dog cries in the night, it is not barking at wind or foxes, but it's something older and colder, something just out of sight. The cry lifts, carries, fades. The village holds its breath. And life, as always, waits to see what will follow, believing that knives crossed on a table invited quarrels. Imagine a humble kitchen in a small village, where the day's light slowly fades behind leaded glass panes, and the scent of wood smoke and simmering stew fills the air. The table, rough-hewn and worn by years of use, stands as the center of daily life. A place of meals shared, stories told, and hands rested after work. Yet, within this simple setting, even the smallest details carry weight, woven into the delicate fabric of belief and custom that shapes every household. Among these customs, one quietly powerful superstition held sway: that knives, when crossed upon the table, were not mere utensils left carelessly, but silent invitations to discord. To see a pair of blades lying in intersection, sharp edges overlapping like the swords of unseen warriors, was to glimpse a warning of tension yet to come, a subtle sign that quarrels might flare and friendship strain. In the world before modern distractions, where neighbors lived close and daily life was a continuous exchange of favors and grudges, the table was more than a place to eat. It was a stage for the relationships that sustained a community. Every gesture, every arrangement spoke volumes. A plate passed too quickly, a seat left empty, a glance held too long. These were moments observed with careful attention. And so, the crossing of knives was never overlooked. The belief was clear and persistent. When knives crossed, it was said, arguments would soon follow, over petty matters or deep-seated grievances. The quarrel might be sparked by words spoken too harshly, or by silences that grew too long. Neighbors who once greeted each other warmly might begin to avoid shared paths. Trust, once steady, wavered like a flame caught in a draft. Many recalled stories of households where a knife had been found crossed at the end of a meal, only for weeks of cold shoulders and whispered complaints to follow. Sometimes, no cause was known, no slight remembered, yet the tension lingered stubbornly, like a shadow cast long across doorsteps and fields. To some, the crossing of knives was seen as a curse, or at least a harbinger, that no apology could fully lift. Because of this, great care was taken in setting and clearing the table. Hands moved deliberately, smoothing cloths, aligning cutlery with quiet precision. Knives were laid side by side or placed apart, always avoiding the telltale intersection. Mothers taught children to respect this subtle language, reminding them that what seemed like small habits could hold great consequences. In village gatherings, these customs extended beyond the household. At fairs or church suppers, when tables groaned under bread and cheese, the proper placement of knives was observed as a mark of respect and harmony. Hosts might discreetly rearrange utensils left askew, restoring peace with a simple, unnoticed gesture. It was understood that order at the table reflected order in the hearts of those who shared the meal. Yet, like many customs born of caution, the belief in crossed knives carried a softer side. It created a language of care, a way to express goodwill and intention without words. The absence of crossed knives was a small but meaningful sign, a signal that the meal was shared in friendship, that hands were open, not clenched. The very act of arranging knives with care became a kind of prayer for peace, a gentle ritual repeated day after day. In some stories, this belief was tied to deeper symbolism. The knife, sharp and dangerous, represented conflict itself, while the tables symbolized unity and sustenance. To cross blades was to threaten that unity, to invite strife where harmony should dwell. It was a reminder that peace was fragile, something to be tended as carefully as the hearth fire or the garden patch. Over time, the superstition faded from everyday talk, slipping quietly into the folds of folklore. But its echoes remain, in the careful setting of a family table, in the subtle awareness of the power held by small acts. Even now, some households keep the habit alive, placing knives gently side by side, honoring the old wisdom that peace can rest in the smallest details. As you listen now, imagine the soft sounds of a kitchen settling for the evening. The scrape of a knife against wood, the quiet clink of dishes, the gentle arranging of cutlery. Picture hands moving with care, aware of unseen threads that tie the moment to what might come next. Feel the slow, steady rhythm of life, where even a pair of crossed knives holds meaning. Let this thought soothe you, that in a world full of noise and uncertainty, peace often comes not from grand gestures, but from the quiet attention given to simple things. The way knives lie on a table, the shape of a moment held gently before it passes. And as you drift towards sleep, carry with you the gentle knowledge that harmony can be crafted and preserved in the softest details of everyday life. Fearing that spilled salt must be cast over the shoulder. Imagine yourself in a modest medieval kitchen, the hearth glowing softly with embers that cast warm light upon rough wooden beams and stone walls. The air carries the faint aroma of herbs drying nearby, mingling with the ever-present scent of wood smoke and earth. In this room, the simplest acts, lighting the fire, fetching water, preparing a meal, are imbued with layers of meaning and ritual. Among these, the handling of salt holds a quiet but powerful place. Salt in the medieval world was no ordinary seasoning. It was precious, often difficult to come by, and carried a sacred significance rooted in ancient beliefs. Harvested from coastal evaporation ponds or mined from deep underground deposits, salt was both a preservative and a symbol of purity, protection, and sustenance. It preserved food against decay, and in doing so, it preserved life itself. Imagine now a woman gathering salt from a small wooden box, its surface worn smooth by years of use. As she measures a pinch, the grains glitter like tiny crystals, catching the firelight and scattering reflections across the worn table. Salt's value is understood not only in its practical use, but in the reverence it commands. It is handled carefully, sparingly, with a respect born of tradition and superstition. But accidents happen. Picture the moment when, in the bustle of meal preparation, a pinch of salt slips from trembling fingers and scatters across the rough-hewn floor. The crystals catch the light for a fleeting instant before settling among dust and straw. The air seems to pause, the household momentarily held in a fragile stillness. In many medieval cultures, spilled salt was more than a trivial mishap. It was a sign, a warning, a gesture laden with unseen forces. The belief was widespread and enduring. Salt spilled must be immediately cast over the left shoulder. This simple act was performed to blind or confuse the devil, who was thought to lurk just behind that shoulder, waiting to take advantage of any misstep. Imagine the woman reacting swiftly, bending to scoop a pinch from the floor and tossing it backward over her left shoulder without looking. The motion is automatic, precise, a ritual ingrained through repetition and shared stories. It is not merely superstition but a protective gesture, a quiet defiance against misfortune and malevolent spirits. This practice echoes older traditions where salt was seen as a purifier, a barrier against evil. Salt crystals were believed to repel dark forces, cleanse spaces, and maintain balance between the visible world and the shadowy realm beyond. By throwing salt over the shoulder, the householder symbolically restores order, seals a breach, and wards off harm. The gesture, though small, carries communal weight. In village markets and taverns, the spilling of salt might provoke knowing glances or soft murmurs. Elders remind children of the old ways, telling stories of misfortune brought by neglecting the ritual. A spilled pinch can prompt a moment of shared understanding. A quiet acknowledgement of the unseen threads that connect daily life to the mysterious. Beyond superstition, the act is a part of the rhythm of medieval existence. A rhythm marked by attentiveness, care, and the weaving of practical and spiritual safeguards. Just as walls are plastered to keep out damp, and herbs are laid along gutters to freshen the air, so too is salt handled with a ritual respect. It's spilling a moment to pause, to act deliberately, and to reaffirm one's place in the delicate balance of life. Over time, the salt shaker or box becomes a repository not only of seasoning but of meaning. Its presence on the table reminds all who gather of sustenance and protection. The throwing of salt over the shoulder is both a moment of humility and power, a recognition that even the smallest slip holds consequence, and that with mindful action, harmony can be restored. Imagine, as night deepens and the household settles, the lingering scent of salt mingling with the warmth of food and the glow of firelight. The memory of spilled crystals and swift gestures fades into the rhythm of daily life, but the lesson endures. In a world where so much is uncertain, simple acts carry weight, and every pinch of salt is a thread in the ongoing tapestry of survival and belief. As you drift into sleep, picture the soft scattering of salt over a shoulder, the quiet strength of a small gesture, and the comforting knowledge that even in the humblest moments, there is protection, intention, and a connection to the ancient rhythms that shaped life long ago. Trusting that whistling indoors summoned mischievous spirits. Imagine yourself in a small timber-framed house, tucked along the winding edge of a village path, sometime in the distant past. The fire in the hearth is low, casting a steady orange glow over clay walls and bundled rushes. Outside, the wind whispers through hedgerows and chimney pots. But inside, everything is still, orderly, familiar, and warm. Within these walls, rules are not just written in law or church, but in habit, tone, and tradition. And among these rules, passed down with particular care, is one very simple instruction. Do not whistle indoors. In many homes, children grow up with this warning. It is not shouted, but murmured gently like all old truths. No whistling in the house, a mother might say, gently pressing her fingers to a child's lips. You don't want to bring anything in. Nothing more is said, but the child understands, even if only faintly, that the sound itself carries weight. Whistling, in this context, is not playful music. It is a summoning, a call carried by air and intent, meant to be avoided. The belief is a quiet one, but persistent. In many regions, the sound of whistling indoors is thought to draw the attention of mischievous forces, spirits, household imps, or things older and less nameable, eager to slip into homes through the open cracks of a whistle's note. Unlike grave warnings of devils or curses, this belief is gentler, subtler, woven into the domestic sphere, wrapped in concern for order, calm, and peace. Whistling was not feared for its volume, but for its invitation. You can imagine the sound itself, light, cheerful, rising suddenly into the air of a kitchen or parlor. It is a sound that doesn't quite belong indoors, where voices are kept low and tasks unfold in quiet concentration. The whistle seems to reach beyond the walls, curling upward like smoke. It fills corners, passes through shutters, nudges at the unseen. And so, families avoid it. Children, being naturally drawn to sound, are often the ones most tempted. A boy practicing while sweeping, or a girl humming through her teeth while winding yarn. In some houses, the response is immediate. A sharp glance, a finger to the lips, a broom handle gently tapped against the floor. That's how mischief starts, someone might say. Not punishment, exactly. Just a reminder that even small things have consequences. Mischievous spirits, in these beliefs, are not monsters or demons, but smaller presences. Things that unsettle, disrupt, turn the milk sour, or hide the broom. They are not cruel, but inconvenient. A whistle is thought to please them, to invite their curiosity. Once called, they might make the dough refuse to rise, or cause the fire to smoke. They might whisper in children's dreams, or tilt a picture on the wall just so. Nothing terrifying, just enough to unbalance the gentle flow of a household. Because life, in this time, is all about rhythm. The order of chores, the flicker of the fire, the passing of seasons outside the window. Anything that unsettles that rhythm, whether illness, argument, or unexplained confusion, is watched with quiet care. Whistling indoors is seen not as evil, but as unnecessary risk. A disturbance in the harmony of the home. Over time, this caution becomes second nature. Just as one knocks on wood or throws salt over the shoulder, one learns to whistle only outside. In fields, on roads, among birds and wind. Outdoors, the sound is harmless, mingling with nature's own music. But indoors, it carries intent. It presses against walls. It is remembered. You might imagine an old grandmother reminding a child, not with fear, but with a soft touch and a smile. Let's not do that in here. Save your tune for the garden. The child nods, and the habit is shaped. Later in life, they will pass on the same reminder, perhaps without even remembering where it came from. This is how traditions endure, not through strict enforcement, but through daily, repeated gestures. Some families go further, holding small customs to keep the spirits calm. A bit of iron above the door, a sprig of lavender in the corner, a charm hung near the hearth. These measures are quiet, nearly invisible, and blend into the texture of daily life. Their purpose is not to banish great evils, but to preserve peace, to maintain the boundary between the known and the unknown, between the visible and what hums beneath the surface. In town squares or village inns, people may laugh about such things in public, but behind closed doors, most follow the same unspoken rules. Better safe than sorry, after all. In a world where so much depends on the delicate balance of warmth, food, health, and sleep, no one wants to tempt the attention of the unseen. Especially not for a tune that could just as easily be carried outside. Even in later centuries, when education and science reshape belief, this caution remains. People forget why the rule existed, but they remember the rule itself. Whistling indoors still feels impolite, unsettling, even if they cannot say why. Some memories live not in the mind, but in the air of the house. The space between firelight and floorboards, where generations of habits have settled like dust. And now, as your thoughts soften and the room around you grows still, imagine the candlelight flickering against stone, the last chores of the day done, and the soft hush of a home at peace. Outside, the wind may sing and birds may whistle, but within, there is only warmth, breath, and quiet. Let yourself rest in that hush, carried gently by a world shaped not only by laws and logic, but by the soft murmur of tradition. A place where silence is sacred, and whistling waits for morning, assuming that seeing your reflection in still water foretold death. Imagine yourself walking slowly along the edge of a quiet village pond. The morning mist still clings low over the grass, and the surface of the water is so smooth, so perfectly still, that it seems untouched by breath or time. The trees around it lean slightly inward, their branches mirrored exactly in the glassy water below. It is beautiful, peaceful, and to those who lived centuries ago, deeply unsettling. In many villages, across generations, it was quietly understood that gazing too long into still water was not just foolish, it was dangerous. To see one's reflection in the surface of a pond, or in the basin of a washbowl, or in a rain-filled barrel, was to risk something far greater than vanity. It was to invite death. The rhythm of their lives was shaped not just by work, harvests, or seasons, but by old beliefs that whispered beneath daily routine. And among those beliefs, few were more quietly respected than this. Water, when still, could see you. And worse, it could remember. Children were taught early not to linger at the edges of calm ponds. Not to stare into barrels of rainwater or polished basins at dusk. A glimpse might be harmless, but to truly meet one's eyes in that silvered surface, to hold that gaze, was to risk giving something away. The reflection, they believed, did not merely mimic you. It reached, it touched, and it might take. To have your soul caught by water was not dramatic. There were no sudden signs. No lightning, no noise. Just a quiet shift, a dullness in the eyes, an illness that took hold and would not leave, a sudden streak of misfortune. Some said the water marked you, placed a kind of quiet claim, and that death, or something close to it, would find you sooner than it should. In this way, villagers moved carefully around the water they lived beside. Wells were safe, their surfaces disturbed with each use. Flowing streams held no fear. They moved too fast, too alive to capture a soul. But ponds, still basins, or troughs left undisturbed, these held power. Laundry was done with eyes averted. Washing one's face in a basin was done quickly. The water stirred before looking down. The rhythm of their lives bent gently around these old ideas. Quiet acts of caution woven into each day. You can imagine a household preparing for sleep. A basin of water set near the fire, warming slightly in the glow. Someone bends to wash, but always looks away. If the water is still, they stir it first with a hand or ladle, watching the surface ripple before trusting it with their face. The room is silent. No one needs to explain why. Everyone understands. Stories passed quietly from one generation to the next. A boy who lingered too long near the mill pond and grew pale within a week. A woman who admired her reflection in a rain barrel and soon after fell ill. Even those who scoffed would still look away, out of habit, out of caution, out of the memory of someone lost. In some villages, charms were hung above water sources. Bits of iron carved wood, herbs tied with twine, not to protect the water itself, but to guard those who used it. Some would speak a blessing when drawing water. Others would knock on wood or stone before approaching, just to break the stillness, to acknowledge the presence that might be waiting there. The fear was not theatrical. It was quiet, subtle, almost invisible from the outside, but it shaped how people moved, how they lived. Even beauty, like a clear, mirror-like pond at sunrise, was met with caution. The stiller the water, the deeper the unease. Over time, beliefs shifted. As religion changed, as books spread, as science grew, some of these fears faded. But even as the logic faded, the instinct remained. Many continued to stir water before using it. Children still hurried past certain pools at dusk. Old houses kept mirrors covered when someone died. Not just to hide sorrow, but because reflections, it was said, might open too easily when grief is near. To see your reflection is, in a way, to step outside yourself. To see your own face without the warmth of motion, the sound of breath, the spark of life. In a world so tied to nature, to cycles of growth and decay, such moments were not taken lightly. And so, they moved gently through their days, avoiding still surfaces, letting water ripple before trusting it, teaching their children to do the same, not because they fully understood, but because the cost of care was small and the weight of regret could be great. As night falls and the pond returns to stillness, the wind gone quiet, the sky reflected perfectly in its surface, you might picture those villagers walking past without looking down. Their faces turned slightly aside, their rhythm undisturbed, the water watching perhaps, waiting, but never receiving what is not freely given. So as you rest, imagine the hush of that pond, the quiet wisdom of old caution, the ripple stirred by a careful hand, and the soul, intact, safely nestled within the rhythm of a life lived slowly, gently, and with just enough space between yourself and your reflection. Believing that crows gathering on a roof brought disaster. Imagine a village just before dusk, the light slanting low across stone cottages and thatched roofs, casting long shadows over lanes worn smooth by centuries of footfall. The air is still, caught between the breath of day and the hush of evening, when even the wind seems to pause. In such a moment, every sound is sharper. The creak of a cart wheel, the soft clink of a milk pail, the faint, rhythmic sound of footsteps returning home. But then, a new noise breaks through. A harsh cawing, not once but again and again, echoing from above. Heads turn. A child stops mid-step. A woman glances toward the sky. Upon the roof of one house, then another, black shapes begin to gather. Winged figures, sharp-eyed and restless. The crows have come. In villages across centuries, this was a sight that drew breath short and stilled conversation. To see crows gather on a rooftop, especially many at once, pacing or still, heads cocked as if listening, was not simply an oddity of nature. It was an omen, clear and dark, a warning that something was coming. Not just misfortune in general, but something sharp and specific. Illness, famine, or fire. Even the most confident men, the ones used to giving orders or negotiating prices, might grow quiet. Business would be delayed, appointments set aside. If a journey had been planned for the afternoon, it might wait until morning. If an agreement was due to be signed, the pen stayed in its well. For all their pride or position, no one quite wished to test the meaning of a crow's gathering. You can picture it. The birds perched in a silent row along the ridge beam, feathers slightly puffed against the chill, their black eyes blinking slow and deliberate. A few shift from foot to foot. One gives a sharp cry, then settles again. The house beneath, once just part of the scenery, now draws attention from all sides. What has happened there? What is about to? The beliefs surrounding crows were shaped not by one single tale, but by centuries of observation and quiet pattern-making. Crows were survivors, intelligent, watchful, always near but rarely trusted. They scavenged the edges of life and death. They circled over fields in drought, over cottages where fever lingered, over villages still smoldering from a night blaze. When they gathered in numbers, it was not unreasonable to wonder if they knew something people did not. Even the sound of them was enough to unnerve. Unlike the gentle songbirds of morning or the soft coo of doves at dusk, the crows' calls were sharp, jarring, difficult to ignore. Their arrival was always announced, not with joy, but with an edge of unease. They did not sing. They declared. Some believed that the crows were messengers, sent ahead of disaster like scouts before an army. Others said they carried memory in their wings, that they returned to places marked by past sorrow, drawn not to the future, but to the echo of grief already sown. A third belief, quieter but no less persistent, held that the birds were neither heralds nor mourners, but warning bells, not causing the misfortune, but calling attention to it before it arrived. In response, villagers developed small habits, rituals almost too subtle to notice. A broom might be set outside the door, bristles up, to turn bad luck away. A child might be asked to knock on wood or toss a pebble at the roof's edge to scatter the birds. Doors would be closed, even on warm days. Smoke from the chimney was watched more closely. Meals were eaten in silence. Among wealthier families, the response was more restrained, but no less real. Manor houses had stone roofs, not thatch, but the crows landed there too. Servants might be sent to clap their hands or wave long sticks to drive them off. Gardeners muttered under their breath. Letters of business were delayed until after the birds departed. Though not spoken aloud, the sense of unease touched even those surrounded by tapestries and titles. And yet, not all crows drew fear. A single bird, or a pair nesting in distant trees, was often ignored or even welcomed. It was the sudden gathering, the deliberate, almost council-like presence on rooftops, that signaled trouble. Numbers mattered. Timing mattered. Stillness mattered. A roof crowded with crows that sat for hours was a kind of waiting room for fate. Historians, looking back, find these beliefs nestled in the corners of parish logs and old journals. Crows settled over the north cottages. By week's end, fever struck. 20 birds upon the roof, and the fire came 2 days after. These entries are not presented as fact, but neither are they dismissed. They are recorded alongside births and deaths and storms. Part of life's weather. Archaeologists may find little of the crows themselves. No feathers remain to mark their presence. But village layouts sometimes reveal extra wooden crosses on homes spared by fire, or charms buried near doorways. These are not the evidence of superstition alone, but of a long, quiet tradition. The belief that nature speaks, if only one learns to watch closely enough. If you imagine yourself in that moment, standing by a window as the light fades and the crows gather, you may feel the stillness that settles. Not panic, not yet, but the slight holding of breath, the sense that something is listening, or something has already been decided. The fire has not come, the illness is not yet at the door, but the birds seem to know. And so, families wait. They do not speak of it too loudly. They go about their evening more carefully. Lamps are trimmed, windows latched. The crows remain for an hour, maybe 2, then lift all at once and vanish into the darkening sky. Only then does breath come easier. The morning returns, as it always does. But the memory of the birds remains, sharp as their cries. And the belief continues that when crows gather on the roof, they are not merely resting. They are watching, and they will not stay unless there is something soon worth witnessing. Fearing that cutting nails on a Friday invited ruin. Imagine a quiet evening settling over a village, where the last hues of sunset fade softly behind low hills, and the air grows cool with the promise of night. Inside humble homes, the day's labors have ended, and families gather close to the hearth. The flickering firelight casts gentle shadows on worn wooden walls, while outside, the steady chirp of crickets rises in the gathering dark. It is in these small, peaceful moments that everyday routines unfold, some so familiar they pass unnoticed. Yet, beneath their simplicity, lie layers of meaning and old belief. One such quiet task was trimming nails. A small act, perhaps done by a child before bed, or an adult preparing for a market day. But in many places and times, this simple grooming carried a weight far greater than it seems today. There was a widespread belief, whispered from generation to generation, that cutting nails on a Friday invited ruin. To do so was to offend fate itself, opening the door to hardship and misfortune before the year's end. This fear was not born from mere superstition alone, but from a world where every action was measured against unseen forces. Days of the week held significance, tied to the cycles of the moon, the influence of planets, or the traditions of faith. Friday, in particular, bore a solemn reputation. It was the day of solemn remembrance and restraint, marked by quiet reflection, fasting, and respect. In Christian tradition, it recalled the crucifixion, a day shadowed by sacrifice and sorrow. To cut one's nails on such a day was, for many, to disrupt the sacred rhythm and invite imbalance. Villagers remembered stories told by elders. Tales of families who trimmed nails on a Friday only to face sudden illness, loss, or crop failure. Some spoke of tradespeople who, after ignoring the warning, found their goods unsold or tools broken. Others recalled how sailors and travelers, mindful of the custom, avoided grooming tasks that might jeopardize their luck on journeys begun at the week's end. The belief was pervasive, shaping the smallest choices of daily life. Children were taught early to check the calendar before taking scissors or a knife to their nails. Mothers might gently remind daughters and sons as the week wound down, while fathers nodded in quiet agreement. Even the act of cutting a single nail could be delayed, postponed until Saturday or Sunday, days deemed safer and more auspicious. This caution extended beyond nails alone. Other small tasks, washing clothes, sweeping floors, or beginning new projects, were also guided by the calendar of fate. Each had its place, its proper time, and breaching these rhythms was believed to ripple consequences through the household and beyond. Yet, the fear of cutting nails on Friday also carried a practical rhythm. It gave structure to weeks filled with hard work and uncertainty. It offered a subtle way for communities to pause, to observe a shared restraint, and to mark time with intention. The act of waiting to groom oneself became part of a larger pattern of care and attention to the cycles of life. For those who ignored the custom, or for travelers unfamiliar with local belief, the consequences might seem coincidental. But within close-knit villages, where oral tradition wove past and present together, the warning held power. It was a quiet pact with fate, a way to acknowledge that life's outcomes were never fully in one's hands. In some regions, additional rituals grew alongside the fear. To counteract the potential harm of a Friday nail cut, people might burn the clippings carefully, scatter them in running water, or bury them in earth. Such acts were meant to return the severed pieces to nature, ensuring that no lingering harm could attach itself to the household. Over time, these practices became part of the fabric of everyday life. They connected individuals to their ancestors, to the land, and to the rhythms of belief that sustained community. Even as modern life moved toward convenience and science, the echoes of these old fears remain. In sayings passed down, in moments of hesitation before grooming, and in the quiet respect paid to the unseen forces that once guided so much of daily existence. As you listen now, imagine the softness of evenings settling over a village. Picture hands poised with care, scissors ready but waiting as the day draws to a close. Hear the gentle crackle of fire and the murmur of voices reminding each other to honor the day. Feel the slow, steady heartbeat of tradition beneath these simple acts. A heartbeat that ties together generations and whispers of fate's subtle hand. Let this thought lull you gently, that even in the smallest tasks, there lives a story of respect, caution, and the enduring human desire to live in harmony with the rhythms that shape our lives. And as you drift towards sleep, carry with you the quiet knowledge that every day, every moment, is woven into the delicate tapestry of time, where even a simple act like cutting nails holds meaning beyond the visible, connecting past and present in a gentle embrace. Trusting that forgetting to knock on wood invited trouble. Imagine yourself standing just inside the doorway of a medieval cottage, the soft light of morning filtering through narrow windows, dust motes drifting lazily in beams of sun. The air carries the mingled scents of wood smoke, damp earth, and the faint sweetness of drying herbs hung in corners. Outside, the village begins to stir. The clatter of wooden carts, distant voices weaving through the lanes, the rhythmic call of a blacksmith's hammer echoing faintly. Within this quiet world, life unfolds through countless small rituals, the invisible threads that bind community and self, fortune and fate. Among these rituals is one so subtle, so woven into the fabric of daily existence, that it passes almost unnoticed, the habit of knocking on wood. To us, it might seem a simple superstition, a casual gesture to ward off bad luck. But in medieval times, this act held weight beyond mere habit. Imagine a villager speaking aloud a hope or a blessing. "The harvest was good this year," or "My child sleeps soundly." These words, spoken with genuine gratitude, carried a risk. The risk that the fortune they celebrated might vanish, slipping away if not properly anchored. The belief was that luck, happiness, and good fortune were fragile guests, easily frightened away by careless speech. To speak of blessings openly, without protection, was to invite their swift departure. And so, knocking on wood, rapping knuckles on doorframes, beams, or tables became a ritual of sealing, a quiet plea to the unseen forces believed to govern fortune. Imagine the feel of rough oak beneath fingertips, the muted thump of a knuckle against grain, the faint echo that travels through timber and wall. This small sound serves as a counterpoint to spoken words, a tangible touch to hold blessings in place. It is a gesture of humility and hope, a physical acknowledgement that fortune is not owned but borrowed, and must be treated with care. The custom is not uniform across places or times. In some villages, a single knock suffices. In others, 3 deliberate taps are required. Sometimes the ritual is accompanied by a whispered word or silent prayer, a secret pact between human and world. Children learn early to knock when speaking of good things, lest misfortune hear and rush in to claim what was left unguarded. This practice extends beyond doorframes. Knocking on the wooden handle of a well bucket, the beam of a roof, or the sturdy leg of a dining table became a way to anchor luck wherever life unfolded. The wood itself is seen as a living protector, connected to the earth and the spirits that dwell within it. To touch wood is to reach into the natural world's strength and ask for its safeguard. Imagine a woman in the kitchen, stirring a pot while murmuring gratitude for the meal. Her hand pauses, lightly taps the sturdy wooden counter, and then returns to the task at hand. A man setting out to the fields pats the handle of his plow before stepping into the morning chill. In these moments, the knocking is both practical and spiritual, a bridge between spoken hope and unseen protection. The belief in knocking on wood reflects a broader medieval understanding of the world, as alive with forces both seen and unseen. Luck, health, prosperity, and safety were not guaranteed by human effort alone, but depended on delicate balances and goodwill beyond reach. Rituals like knocking offered a way to participate in this balance, to acknowledge vulnerability, and to seek harmony. Yet, as with many customs, the ritual also carried caution. To fail to knock, whether out of forgetfulness or skepticism, could invite disaster. Stories passed down in hushed tones tell of sudden misfortune, inexplicable accidents, or a run of bad luck traced back to a mistap on wood. These tales served as reminders, binding the community in shared belief and practice. At village gatherings, the habit is visible in subtle gestures. Someone praises a good harvest, and an older neighbor will gently rap the table. A child boasts of an achievement, and a friend will lightly touch the wooden doorframe. The knocks resonate softly, a communal chorus of care, respect, and the shared desire to hold good fortune close. Imagine the texture of these moments. The warmth of sunlit wood, the cool touch of grain beneath knuckles, the rhythm of knocks punctuating words. The sounds are low and comforting, grounding the scattered threads of hope and gratitude into something solid and familiar. In time, the practice endures, layered with generations of repetition and meaning. It is not recorded in grand histories or inscribed on stone, but lives in the quiet gestures of everyday life. Knocking on wood becomes a silent language, a gentle comfort in an uncertain world. As evening falls and the village settles into the hush of night, the doorframe stands steady, witnesses to countless hopes, thanks, and protective taps. The ritual lingers, a tender thread weaving through the rhythms of living, a small assurance that even the most fragile blessings can be held, if only for a moment, by the simple act of knocking on wood. And as you drift softly into sleep, let your mind rest on the rough warmth of oak, the soft echo of a knuckles tap, and the quiet human need to anchor hope in the world. In that gentle sound, find the comfort of connection, protection, and the timeless dance between gratitude and fate.